Today we're going over the Frozen Orb Sorceress for patch 2.5 Ladder Season 2. This also does include a mention of the Frozen Orb Hyrda Variant, so stay tuned for that. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Now let's get into it. So this build primarily focuses on dealing cold damage. You can also hybrid it out with some fire and lightning if you so choose, but is mostly a solo magicifying character. You can also use it to farm keys and runes and things like that. Overall, it is a B tier build because it has high mobility and is very good at single target damage. This build guide does assume that you are going to be level 75 before moving over to it. However, it's not actually that hard to play the game before 75, but I am assuming that you are 75 here. The Frozen Orb itself is actually a really good skill for single target. I know it looks like there's a bunch of stuff spraying everywhere, but most of its damage is in the core of the orb, making it a great boss farmer. It is a great ladder starter as well. It is super fast paced as well because we're playing Sorceress. There are plenty of endgame gear options as well as a bunch of magic find options. Now unfortunately this build is pretty squishy. It is slow against cold immunes and takes some getting used to with the range and the proper placement and positioning when you cast the orbs. Specific breakpoints are very important. You do need to hit like 63 FCR or 100 or 105. I will say that this is not really a great build to bring into group play because the damage does fall off due to its lack of synergies, unlike its sister, the Blizzard Sorceress. Now with the addition of 2.5's Sunder Charms and Terror Zones, the Cold Sorceress, it is arguably the strongest starter. So if you're playing Blizzard or anything in the Cold tree, the Cold Mastery is just so strong. Now to optimize the Cold Rupture, we're going to be using Cold Mastery. This thing is actually going to be the biggest damage increase over any piece of gear that you wear. Overall, we're pretty much using the standard variant here, and we just want to add a bunch of damage, and you're good to go. Now in order to counter the cold damage, all you just need to do is just put on some cold resist charms or some cold resist items and you should be fine. You could even go train gloves if you wanted. They have 30 cold resist on them, and if you some reason need that extra FCR, train gloves also are fantastic for that. Now for the terror zones, what we really want to have is a lot of elite groups, high density, and basically no cold immune monsters. So for example, the cow level, Talrash's Tombs, as long as you're not doing any tombs that are cold immune monsters. And then there's going to be Chaos Sanctuary, Travancore, Tristram as well. So basically just focus on quick access, focus on being able to take out the elite groups as much as possible. Now the worst possible places to farm are going to be places with a lot of immunities, high physical damage or elemental damage, just because this build is pretty squishy, and just not being able to maneuver or kill many elite groups. For the standard variant of skills, we're going to be going Frozen Orb and Energy Shield. In order to do this properly, we have 20 points in the Frozen Orb, 20 into Ice Bolt, Energy Shield afterwards with Telekinesis and Warmth. Your 1-point wonders are going to be Static Field, Teleport, Frozen Armor, Cold Mastery, Frost Nova, and Glacial Spike. And as I mentioned earlier with the Sunder Charms, if you do get the Sunder Charm, you really want to make sure you max this Cold Mastery out to get the maximum amount of benefit from it. You can always view more details about the skills here on the Maxroll guide in the link below. For the attributes, we're going to be using enough strength and dex to be able to wear our gear. However, this time we're only going to be putting enough points in vitality to reach 1,000 life if we can, and then the rest of it goes into Energy Shield. Because we're using Energy Shield, as we said before here, that is going to be important to have a lot of points into mana. Now for the gear options, there's actually quite a few. We mainly want to focus on plus to skills and faster cast rate. The other things are resistances as well to keep yourself alive as much as possible, and then Magic Find. Magic Find's great for lower player count builds, which is, you know, this one. And then continuing the theme here, all of the stuff in teal is going to be really sought after. You can go and check this out again in the link below, but mainly faster cast rate, faster hit recovery, resistances, magic find, and skills are really what you're going to aim for here. Now none of these areas require a Sunder Charm, and the ones with the check mark means you can use the starter variant that you'll see below. The Mausoleum and Dariel Secret Cow level are all fantastic places to go, and if you have a mercenary here, you can even do Countess. Stony Tombs is very fun, as well as Ancient Tunnels are super solid. Taking out the ghosts and popping the chests with your Sorceress because you teleport super fast is a super solid idea, and at the end you can even take out the Summoner for hate keys and trading. Arachnid Lair is a super quick access lair and doesn't have any cold immunes. However, it is kind of tight corridors, making it a little bit difficult to aim Frozen Orb in some situations. Lower Karas is always a good place to go and just click things real fast and see if you get any burr runes. Travancore is also quick access, a little bit dangerous though, but it can yield heavy rewards. And then probably the classic best one to start off a ladder with, that is Mephisto. Mephisto and Andariel, these monsters just drop loot for days, and it is a very, very good way to build economy on a cold sorceress. Now, River of Flame can actually be good as long as there's no grotesques here. As soon as there's grotesques, just skip it and move straight to Chaos Sanctuary. The only things you can't kill in here are the Oblivion Knights. So you're going to need your Mercenary to be able to take those guys out. Diablo, of course, is just going to melt from your Frozen Orb once you actually get that targeting down, so he's a great place as well. Candleskin is actually super good for this build because it's a long, straight hallway where your Frozen Orb just travels straight down the middle, taking them all out. You can also do Neelthak too. This one, if you start learning the distance of your Frozen Orb, you can explode the Frozen Orb right on the center of Neelthak to do the most amount of damage. Worldstone's kind of a toss-up. It's pretty much good for every build in the game, and then it's also bad for every build in the game. There's so many monsters that spawn here. Sometimes there's immune, sometimes there's not. So depending on what the immunities say and how it feels that run, try out Worldstone. Mercenary, we're going to be using a Might Infinity. The rest is going to be our Fortitude and our Andariel's Visage. This is to allow us to do more damage to things. We don't have to put as many points into Cold Mastery if we don't want. And if we're actually going to hybrid out and do like Hydra or something, the extra bonus damage coming in from Infinity is going to be really good. Now at the beginning of every single run, make sure you cast Frozen Armor and Energy Shield to keep your survivability to the max. Make sure you point and shoot your Frozen Orb and make sure it explodes in the enemies for maximum amounts of damage. Use your Telekinesis against any immune monsters to keep the monsters stunned so your Mercenary can take them out without any problems. Using Teleport to reposition your Mercenary is actually really important here as well. He is a huge meat shield for you and takes out cold immunes. For large groups, you want to use Frozen Orb and cast it in the center. Again, the core of the orb is what deals the most damage. You can also use a Glacial Spike to give us some CC and survivability as well. It's not going to do a whole lot of damage on this build, but because we're already building a cold skill tree, you're also going to have some decent amount of CC here. But if you want to freeze them, use Glacial Spike to freeze them for a little bit to maybe keep you out of dangerous situations or keep your Mercenary alive while he's trying to take something out. Always whenever you have the opportunity, use Static. It brings them down to about 50% HP and Hell, and you could even get more depending on if you have Conviction or lower res prior. Now to maximize magic finding, say you're farming Mephisto or Andariel, make sure if you have a bunch of magic find on swap that before the monsters die, you swap over to that so you get the benefits of the extra magic find. Try not to kill monsters over non-walkable terrain, as well as make sure you keep your distance with this build. It is pretty squishy. For the faster cast rate breakpoints, really try to hit 105 FCR if you can, but 63 is definitely required at the minimum. Anything lower than that and it kind of starts to get a little bit rough with the mobility and survivability because you're not getting out of danger fast enough. The higher, faster hit recovery you have here too is also very good. When you're wearing a Spirit, all you really need to do is have 5 FHR small charm in your inventory and you hit 60. Now for the hardcore variant, we change it up a little bit here and we actually go for a vitality build instead. We put enough points into strength to wear our gear, dexterity to maintain 50% chance to block with Storm Shield, and then everything else goes into vitality. You can even put points into energy shield still and just run a weaker energy shield for a little bit of extra survivability if you want a little extra something. The most important thing here is to make sure your resistances are overcapped against Conviction. Using Crown of Ages, Storm Shield, Sandstorm Treks for FHR, Verdungos, or even String of Ears while you have it is very good for more survivability with resistances and damage reduction. Do not use Oculus on hardcore unless you have a Death Wish. Instead, use Death's Fathom or Heart of the Oak. You can even use Wizard Spike for a little extra resistances as well. Moving on to the starter variant, as I said before, we really care about plus the skills, faster hit recovery, faster cast rate, and resistances. And we're just going to do our best that we can. Spirit Sword, which is actually pretty solid. Lore, Ancient's Pledge for resistances, just some res boosts that we can find. Stealth is super solid. If we can find some things like these gloves to shop from merchants with resistances, that's really good. Same thing with the belt and any rings that you find along the way. Maybe Ormus will have something good for you this time, but probably not. Just some charms to fill up some of the space with life and resistance. For the mercenary, all you pretty much need to care about is getting him an insight as soon as possible for your mana sustain. If you can give him a smoke and some extra life as well, that's really important, but he mainly survives based on your ability to teleport really well. We use Frozen Orb, Ice Bolt as normal. Cold Mastery, I'd actually recommend trying to get to level 17, aka 100% chance to pierce, and then Energy Shield and Telekinesis to be able to get that extra survivability. I wouldn't recommend as a starter build to go straight into Energy Shield yet, so we're going to recommend going to Vitality. Now for the standard gear, we're using Death's Fathom, Shaco, Viper Magi, which we can also use Chains of Honor, Mara's Kaleidoscope, Spirit Monarch, Wartravs, 40 MF Ring, Arachnid's Mesh, Stone of Jordan, and Chance Guards. Again, you can check the gear options, but you can even do more Magic Find if you would like instead of Arachnid's Mesh. We're going to be using small charms with Magic Find and resistances if we can find them. We have one cold skiller here with FHR, so we can hit that 60 FHR breakpoint. Again, all you would need would be 5 FHR from a small charm, and you could hit that 60. The rest are cold skillers with a Geed's Fortune, an Annie, and a Torch. You can always swap some of this damage out for more Magic Find if you would like to. Now what's the Sorceress without the Tal Rasha's set build? This whole set makes it so you can freaking glow as a character. It also is fairly cheap overall. The only things that are a little bit tough can be the Tal Rasha's armor and the Tal Rasha's amulets. Once you have the full set, you actually get more faster hit recovery, so it's pretty easy to hit 86 FHR. We really want to hit 105 FCR, and again, if you want to use Cold Rupture, you can use this in order to farm any monster in the game. Now moving on to the Frozen Orb Hydra Sorceress. This build doesn't necessarily focus on the plus to cold skill damage because we're also going to be doing fire damage. Instead, we focus on plus to skills and Magic Find. Hitting at least 63 FCR is important, as we mentioned before, as well as 105. Hitting 60 FHR is pretty easy with the Spirit and 1 FHR small charm. Using Hodo is very good to take full advantage of both the cold and the fire damage. You could even use Estrudas. When you combine this with Chains of Honor though, we have a lot of resistances. We're going to be using Hodo, Shaco, Chains of Honor, Mara's Kaleidoscope, Spirit Monarch, Wartravs, Magic Find Ring, Resistance Ring, Arachnid's Mesh, and Chance Guards. Now with this build, you can either choose to go with the Chilling Grand Charms, cold damage, or you can go with the Burning Grand Charms with fire damage, depending on which one you want to be focusing on mainly. Overall, pretty much the same thing here with Res and Magic Find. Skillers for damage as well with Geed's Fortune, Annie, and Torch. For the skill tree, make sure you max out Frozen Orb first, Ice Bolt, then Hydra, then Fire Mastery, then Fireball. The reason why we go for Fire Mastery first is because you get more bang for your buck per point when you go Fire Mastery. The classic 1-point wonders stay the same, being Static Field, Teleport, Frozen Armor, Cold Mastery, Frost Nova, Glacial Spike as well. And for the Hydra build, you just want to go straight Vitality, don't worry about Energy Shield at all. You're already spread pretty thin when it comes to skill points. Now with the damage variant, this one is straight up just trying to get as much damage as you possibly can. We're going to be using maximum amount of skillers, Death's Fathom with a facet, Night Wings with a facet, and Ormus with a facet. The thing to know about Ormus is that you can't get any level 30 skill on Ormus robes. So we're going to be using Energy Shield instead for a little extra survivability. We use 3 skills on our amulet with Spirit Monarch, resistances on our boots, Stone of Jordan's, Arachnid's Mesh, and then Mage Fist. If you're going to go with Cold Rupture, maybe you could use Trangs instead to counter that negative effect. For the quick summary of the Frozen Orb Sorceress on 2.5, make sure you keep your buffs up at all times, Battle Orders, Battle Command, Frozen Armor, Energy Shield. Use Telekinesis anytime you can to save time and to stun enemy immune so your mercenary can take them out easier. Enough points into strength to wear your gear, as well as the remaining points go into energy instead of vitality, unless specified otherwise. With this build, the positioning of your character is very important to the distance of the enemy. So be aware of that, get used to it, practice with it, and then dominate. The biggest damage you can do is when the Frozen Orb explodes inside of your targets. Use lower Res Wand, Infinity, or even that Sunder charm to be able to break the cold immunes. You can even go with that hybrid build of Hydra as well. As just a little extra safety, you can use Glacial Spike with the mass AoE freeze that it has. Insight on your Mercenary is really good to solve your mana problems in the early game. I hope you enjoyed this guide. I will see you guys for Season 2. I hope you will all be blasting, especially with these new Sunder charms. Cold Sork is gonna freaking love them. Anyways, much love. You are all beasts.